How do 11 family members under 3 generations all agree to end their own lives at the same time as part of a ritual mass suicide? In an extremely brutal way at that. That's what happened to the Badia family, and psychologists say it was a result of shared psychosis. But others, including their extended family, believe they were all murdered and that this was just a huge cover-up. This is probably one of the scariest things that I've ever read about, so let's talk about it. The Badia family was super close-knit, and the main 11 family members had lived in a 3-story house in North Delhi's Barari neighborhood for 20 years. They owned 2 shops, one of which was on the first floor of their home, and the other was a plywood shop not much further away. They were all highly educated and really loved by the community. In 2007, the patriarch of the family, who was Lalit's dad, unexpectedly passed away. This is when Lalit's behavior completely shifted, and his once extroverted, caring personality soon became very controlling and quiet, and he very slowly began isolating the rest of his family from the outside world. But after his dad died, he became the leader of the family, especially financially, so what he said, everyone pretty much just followed without question. He was really smart and considered wise beyond his years. He would later go through a near-death experience which really shook him up, and for a year after that, he became voluntarily mute. He never received psychological help for this, and it was only during a morning prayer with his family that he suddenly regained his voice. Then, one day out of the blue, Lalit told his family that he was possessed with his late dad's soul, and he said that his dad was giving him instructions on how to attain a good life. When his dad's spirit would enter his body, his family said that his voice would change to sound exactly like his father. Lalit would instruct his family on how to behave, and 2 of his family members were so influenced by him that they began writing in diaries every day, and based on the entries, it truly seemed like they 100% believed Lalit was possessed with his late dad's spirit. Nobody in the community knew what was going on behind closed doors though, and nobody knew the tragedy that was about to take place. On the morning of July 1st, 2018, a neighbor of the Badia family went to meet Lalit for their regular morning walk, but Lalit was nowhere to be found, and both of his shops were still closed, which was odd because they would usually open up at 5:30 every morning, and at this point, there was a line of people gathering outside the store. So the neighbor walks up to the family's house and sees that the front door is slightly ajar. When he enters, he walks up the first set of stairs and finds an extremely gruesome scene. 10 of the Badia family members, including Lalit, were all dead, hanging from an iron railing in the courtyard of the house. They'd all been blindfolded. They were gagged with a wet cloth which was held in by duct tape, and most of them had their hands and feet tied together behind their backs. They were hanging in batches of 3, and they had cotton balls shoved in their ears. And even scarier was the fact that all of their faces had been tightly wrapped in a bedsheet. Sitting on the floor near them were 5 stools. Laying on the floor in the next room was their grandma, and she was dead as well, but she had been strangled to death. If you can imagine, this was a horrifying scene, as the neighbor literally found the entire family dead. And what's really sad is that the ages of the deceased were between 15 and 85. Even the children had been hanged. The only survivor of this entire family was their pet dog, who had been chained on the roof to the same bar that the family had been found hanging from. When he was found, he had a really high fever, and I can only imagine what he went through seeing his entire family die like that and not being able to help. So needless to say, the police were called, and when they arrived at the scene, they initially thought the Badia family was murdered. I mean, why else would all of their hands and feet be tied together? And why would they be blindfolded like that? And the grandma had been strangled, so this seemed to be a clear case of foul play. But then authorities started combing the house for evidence, and this is when they found 11 diaries that had been written in over the past 11 years. More specifically, the family began writing in the diaries in 2007, the same year that Lalit's dad died, and when he said he became possessed with his spirit. In these diaries, the family detailed exactly how they were found at the crime scene. They wrote how all 10 members of the family would have their hands and legs tied together, faces covered, gagged, and ears stuffed with cotton balls. They wrote about how they would hang in batches of 3, and even wrote how the grandma was too old to hang, so she was going to be strangled in the next room. One entry read, quote, "Everyone will tie their own hands, and when the ritual is done, everyone will help each other untie themselves." At this point, authorities had no idea what was going on because the diaries detailed the exact crime scene, and they questioned whether or not the family wrote them or if someone else did. A handwriting analysis was done, and it was confirmed that the diaries were written by 2 family members, Priyanka and Neetu. They wrote down everything Lalit instructed when he was possessed with his dad's spirit. So then police started looking for any other significant clues in the house to point to what the heck was going on, and why these diary entries were written by the family. Police then found evidence that the family had been participating in a ritual for the last 8 days of their life. And this was backed up by the last journal entries, which talked about witchcraft and occult practices. These entries are literally terrifying, and they were written every single day, and they almost seemed conversational, like the family was talking to someone not there, which I guess makes sense considering they thought that Lalit was possessed by his late father. Authorities found no evidence of a robbery or any signs of a struggle, and when they reviewed the CCTV footage from a nearby business that showed the Badia house, it showed no one entering the house other than the family. But I will say, this footage is really creepy to me because it shows the family carrying in the 5 stools found at the scene, as well as the wire that they were found hanging from and tied up in. It's really creepy to me because it shows them literally setting up and planning their own demise, and whether they knew it at the time or not is the main question. So multiple people spoke with the family on the night of their deaths, and not one person noticed anything odd. The family didn't say anything out of the ordinary and even said that they would talk the next morning. So surely they were murdered, right? After reading every diary entry, police discovered that the family was performing a ritual of a symbolic representation of a banyan tree, and in the diary it said that they had to behave like the roots hanging from the tree, which is eerie because police described the scene of them hanging exactly like a tree. Before they hung themselves, they placed a bucket of water near them, and it was believed by them that the water would change color when the ritual was done. And based on the journal entries, it's believed that Lalit was the mastermind of the entire thing, and he got his family to follow him by telling them the soul of his dad had entered his body, and told him that's what the family needed to do. Lalit told his family that at the end of the ritual, the spirit of his dad would come back and untie their hands. Based on this evidence, it became clear to authorities that the rest of the family didn't think that they would die doing this. They thought that this was just a ritual. It's believed that Lalit was the one to tie everyone up, and police also believe that he was the last to die. During a post-mortem examination on the bodies, authorities found almost no signs of defensive wounds. They even stated that it seemed as though the family was hanging peacefully. Because police couldn't find any evidence to support murder, they eventually ruled the Badia deaths as a ritual mass suicide motivated by shared psychosis. Shared psychosis is a psychiatric syndrome in which symptoms of a delusional belief are transmitted from one person to another. Police believe that Lalit suffered from some sort of delusional disorder, and unfortunately, since he was the leader of the family, the rest of them kind of just blindly followed. But one thing just doesn't make sense to me, and it's small pieces of evidence they found when doing the post-mortem examinations. Authorities found that the grandma who was strangled had small injuries indicating that she could have been held down, and that she resisted the strangulation. One of the older brothers was also found to have a small cut on his knuckle, and one of his arms were raised when he was found, indicating that he was trying to free himself. And I think this is the saddest detail of all, but the youngest child had partially swallowed the towel that was in their mouth. It's not clear if this was accidental or if it was forced down their throat like that. All of this evidence was so minor that authorities couldn't prove whether this was indeed a mass suicide or if it was maybe forced at the hands of Lalit. If this truly was just a ritual and none of them expected to die, why was the grandma strangled to death first? To me, that shows ill intentions. Some think that the reason they were all blindfolded and had their ears plugged was so that they couldn't see or hear the others before them struggling and dying. The kids were found to be tied tighter than anyone else, almost as if they were not intended to escape. Some extended family believe that they were all murdered and this was a huge cover-up. And their main reasoning is that if Lalit was truly responsible, or even if they didn't mean to die, Lalit's hands wouldn't have been tied too. Despite major backlash and public outcry, police have stuck with their original ruling that this was a ritual mass suicide as a result of shared psychosis. To this day though, so many questions remain unanswered, such as how 11 different people over 3 generations all agreed to end their own lives, and why no one questioned Lalit. Another major question is how not one single person told anyone outside of the family. You'd think that the younger children would tell their friends or something, but not one single person said a word of what they had planned. It's now been 7 years, and whatever happened to the Badia family that summer night remains a mystery.